you would please, keep my wife in your prayers. Because of her shoulder, she has to sleep on her back, and she's not sleeping very well. So if she don't sleep well, I don't sleep well. So just keep her in prayer. She, I don't know, she probably finally got to bed at 2 or 3 o'clock this morning and went to sleep. So please keep her in prayer. The book of Joshua. Joshua chapter 1, we'll be putting in at verse 10. Remember, Moses has passed, right? So Moses has passed away. Joshua has assumed command of the Israelites. They're standing on the edge of the Jordan River, and they are about to enter into the promised land. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it? So for 40 years, they wandered around in the wilderness because they didn't obey God and go into the promised land when he told them to. And that generation that was there that disobeyed God has all passed away. This is a younger group of people now, and Joshua is taking over from Moses, and he's going to enter in. Now, one of the things you're going to see in the book of Joshua, one of the smaller themes that runs through it, is this idea of leadership. How Joshua takes control and takes command of the people. Now, Joshua has had an advantage that Moses didn't have. Joshua sat under Moses. Joshua watched Moses during the entire wilderness experience. And he got to glean from Moses the things that leaders do that are good and the things that you shouldn't do as a leader. I'm going to fill you in on a little secret. The greatest quality, I believe, of leadership is humility. And the reason for that is there's really not a school of leadership, all right? You're giving, especially in a church, you're given a bunch of human problems. Usually it's human conflict. And your job is to resolve these conflicts with as little damage as can be done, all right? So how do you know where that line is? Most of the time, and I'll speak for me, you mess it up. You either go too far or you don't go far enough. And in either case, there are consequences. And in either case, you've got to be able to say humbly, I'm sorry, I'm human, I've erred. And then you learn from that mistake. Now, the guy that doesn't learn from the mistakes is going to be in trouble. Okay? And this is true in all forms of leadership. You do the best you can, and you stay prayed up on the situation. Now, my biggest problem, just as my personality and who I am, is that when I see something that I don't think is right, I want to act on it. I want to get it right. That impulse to do something right away has probably got me in more trouble than anything. And it's not so much that what I did or what I wanted to do wasn't right. That's not it. It's the way in which I do it. If I would just wait a little while, just a little bit, and spend a little more time praying about it and then wait for God to give me a clear path to follow, I find that I do much better. Basically, what I really need, I need to bounce more stuff off my wife because we are not the same person. We are very different in how we view things and handle conflict. And I need her tempering. Though I think we need to rush in and get something done, sometimes you're dealing with people here, right? And there's always going to be feelings on both sides. You have to take that into account. Now, Joshua is about to lead a very stubborn and obstinate people into a land that was promised to them by God, all right? Joshua has watched Moses, but he's never done what Moses has done. It's heavy is the head that wears the crown. You know what I mean? You'll figure it out. And I want you to understand one thing, though. as you step into leadership roles, and all of you should start thinking of ministries that you want to be a part of, and eventually you're going to be the one in charge of the ministry. I was sitting in church one Sunday, right about where Miss Medlin is, and God put upon my heart that I had sat in church long enough and that I wasn't a part of anything. I really wasn't. And I made up my mind that day I needed to do more. So I went up to the pastor after the church and I said, I want to start doing something in the church. And he looked at me and he said, great. He said, we want to start a college and career Sunday school class. We need somebody to lead it. And I thought, what have I done? That's craziness. And then I went up to Brother Eller and I said, Brother Eller, I want to start going in the prison ministry with you. Because there was like 5 guys that went, and they were always having a great time. I thought, that just looks like fun to me, right? And Brother Eller grabs me and he says, Bill, I've been looking for someone to take over the prison ministry. And I thought, what have I done? No, I just want to be a part. And then I went up and Bobby wanted to do Awana. And so we were going to help in Awana, and they gave us like the 7th and 8th graders. Just shoot me in the head. The hardest group of people I've ever had to do. My wife loves them. That's her group. For me, give me the older ones. I'd rather do the older kids than the junior high kids. But I jumped in both feet into areas, and I'd really never done any of them before, right? But here's what I want to encourage you with. You don't do it alone. That's right. You really don't do as much of it as you think you do. It's God that does it. He's just using you like a vessel. You're kind of like the hammer. You know what I mean? He'll give you everything you need to do it. He will encourage you, as will those around you, the whole time you're doing it. He'll go before you. You've just got to put your faith that he's going to do it and allow him to do it. Leadership, you're going to find that the closer you walk with God, the easier it is. Now, Joshua's got it kind of tough. We're talking 1 million people. We're talking a crowd. And he begins in verse 10, and he says, Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, Pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, Prepare provisions for yourselves, for within 3 days you are to cross this Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess it. Now, they had a really good chain of command. They were able to get the message out to 1 million people extremely quickly, okay? So it meant one guy tells one guy, and he's in charge of 5 guys, and those 5 guys, they talk to 20 more guys, and so on and so forth. And the word goes out to the camp, prepare. So they are on one side of the Jordan getting ready to cross in. Now, on this side of the Jordan, in the wilderness experience, now you have to kind of understand this, God promised them a land full of milk and honey, overflowing with things, right? They chose not to go in. Well, because of that decision, they've been wandering around in a desert. Now, what was it they were eating in the desert? Loud. Manna. Bread from heaven. There wasn't enough food there to feed them. They were going to die. So what did they do? They ate manna. Where'd they get their water from? The rock. Remember? God brought water forth from the rock. There wasn't enough food and there wasn't enough water for them to survive in that wilderness. They were completely dependent upon God for the sustenance they had. He says to them, get ready to go in, prepare. So what did they do? They went out and they gathered manna again. So they gathered manna, they filled up what skins they had with water, and they're preparing to enter the land. Now there was one thing about manna. Manna didn't keep very well, did it? What you didn't eat today rotted before tomorrow. you couldn't keep it. So if you were gathering provisions, as far as food went, you had 1 day's worth of food, right? Now, that was okay because the land they were entering into, they entered into it at a very specific time. Look at Joshua chapter 3 and verse 15. It says, "And when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, and the feet of the priests carrying the ark were dipped in the edge of the water," now listen carefully, "for the Jordan overflows all its banks all the days of harvest." They needed enough food to get them through 1 day, and after that they entered the promised land. And the promised land was during the harvest season, and God said he was going to push the Canaanites out as they entered in. So when they went in, the houses were there, the furniture was in them, the fields were full of a harvest ready to be taken, the garden was ready for picking. Everything you needed to live was ready for them the moment they walked into the promised land. Now when they walk in, as they're about to walk into the promised land, He wants everyone there to understand, this is what I always had planned for you. This is it. This is what you should have done 40 years ago. Now, the reason they didn't go in was because they had been discouraged. Now we're gonna look at this. He says, verse 12. Well, when he said, "For within 3 days," that phrase, it would be like us saying the day after tomorrow or in a few days. It was a common phrase which meant a short period of time, not so much exactly 3 days to them. And he says, verse 12, "To the Reubenites and to the Gadites and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, Remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, The Lord your God gives you rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your cattle shall remain in the land which Moses gave you beyond the Jordan, but you shall cross before your brothers in battle array, all your valiant warriors, and shall help them, until the Lord gives your brothers rest, as he gives you, and he also possesses the land which the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to your own land and possess that which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise." Now, if we go back to Numbers, go back in your Bible to Numbers chapter 32. I want you to carefully listen to an incident that happened, and this is where Moses, being a leader, had failed one time and didn't want to fail again. He saw the problem in how easily people are discouraged. We as Christians need to be very, very careful speaking with each other that we don't discourage. We are to edify one another. Edification means to build up, to encourage. When's the last time you told your Sunday school teacher what a good job he does? Or last time you told the ushers, I appreciate what you do? Or Steve for leading music. Coleman and Pat for running the sound system. And all the other things that everyone in this church, everyone's got a job. Everyone in here, most everyone in here is doing something. But when's the last time you told them, I appreciate the effort you put forth? It means something, people. It really does. Otherwise, we end up doing, and we feel after a while that, well, they don't even notice what I do. I know we do it for the Lord. I know that. But it always does us well to be appreciated. Now, what had happened in chapter 32 of Numbers, it says, Now the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad had an exceedingly large number of livestock. So these are herders. So when they saw the land of Jazar and the land of Gilead, that it was indeed a place suitable for livestock, the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben came and spoke to Moses and Eleazar the priest, to the leaders of the congregation. Now, so they haven't got to the Jordan River, and they haven't stepped into the promised land yet, and yet here they are, and they've conquered the tribes of this area, and they're looking around saying, wow, this is perfect for what we do. This is absolutely perfect land for grazing our livestock on. And so he says, they came to the leaders of the congregation, saying, at Taroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elah, Sabam, Nebo, and beyond. The land which the Lord conquered before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. They said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. But Moses said to the sons of Gad, to the sons of Reuben, shall your brothers go to war while you yourselves sit here? Now why are you discouraging the sons of Israel from crossing over into the land which the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the sons of Israel so that they did not go into the land which the Lord had given them. So the Lord's anger burned in that day, and he swore, saying, none of the men who came up from Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, for they did not follow me fully, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, for they have followed the Lord fully. So you remember the story. They come out of Egypt, and they're ready to enter the promised land. Hundreds of years have gone by. This is it. This is what God always intended for you to have. And so Moses sends spies into the land. And they go in and they look at the land and they come back out. And Moses is just waiting for them to tell the people, man, this is it. This is the greatest place you've ever seen. And that's exactly what Jacob did. That is exactly what Caleb did. Joshua did and Caleb, I'm sorry. So Joshua and Caleb go in. They're two of the spies. They come out and they're saying, it is exactly what God said. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. God is going to go before us. God is going to move the Canaanites. Remember now, he made all these promises. At one time he said, I'm giving you a land, and this is what the land is going to be. It's the greatest place you've ever seen. And I'm going to go in front of you, and I'm going to get rid of all the Canaanites. Well, when they saw the land was exactly what God said, their faith that God was going to move out the Canaanites grew. God's going to do it. This is what he said it was going to look like. It's exactly what it looks like. This is what he said he's going to do. I'm ready. Let's go. But the others didn't see it that way. The others went into the land, and yeah, they saw that it was a land flowing with milk and honey, but they didn't have the faith that Caleb had. They didn't have the faith that Joshua had. And they saw the inhabitants of the land and said, ooh, they're some big folks, man. They're giants. We ain't giants. They're giants. I don't think this is a good idea. When they came back, it's the story they told everyone. If we go in there, we're going to be destroyed. We're going to be killed. We're going to be wiped out. They didn't go back to the people expressing the promises that God had made to them. Doesn't matter how big they are. God's going to fight this battle, right? Doesn't matter how many there are. With God, you're always in the majority, always. No, they looked at what things they felt they themselves couldn't do and projected that to the people. And in the end, the people said, we ain't going. Moses knew he had made mistakes. Probably picked the wrong people to go in and look to start with. Because when you're looking for things spiritually, you got to have spiritual eyes. You've got to put your faith in the one who made the promises to start with. This is a God thing. This ain't a war thing. This ain't a battle thing. God had told them that he was going to lead them out of Egypt, and that not only would you leave Egypt, but the Egyptians are going to give you money. They're going to give you gold. They're going to give you jewels. You're not coming out empty-handed, folks. We're not going to be running. We're going to walk out wealthy. Exactly what happened. God said, I will be the one that protects you. He drowned Pharaoh's army. All of the things that God did over and over again should have just continually grown their faith. And yet, they were spiritually weak when they needed to be at their strongest. And so when they came out, they discouraged the people. Now, spring forward 40 years, all those people, just like the Bible said, had died. They're walking towards the promised land now. And they're right on the edge of it. The Jordan is right there. They are right on the edge. And 3 of the tribes said, look, rather than going in, why don't you just give us this? This is perfect for us. And Moses sees it again. Moses says, man, if I give them this land, and they don't have to go in, and God doesn't have to fight the battle in front of them, they're all going to chicken out just like they did last time. They're not going to do it. They're not going to believe God's going to protect them. So Moses says to them then, what are you trying to do? Why do you want to discourage the entire group of people again? Did you see what happened the last time? It cost the lives of everyone over 20 years old, except for Caleb and Joshua and Moses. We don't want this to happen again. And they said, look, we'll go in front. Here's what we'll do. We'll take our valiant warriors, and they will lead the people in. And they will stay there, and they will fight all of the battles until God has given everybody their possession. And when he gives all of them their possession, then we'll come back and go back to our families on the other side of the Jordan. And Moses agrees. Now, I don't know that if Moses would have seen it to the end, I still don't know that Moses would have made the same decision. There were consequences for staying on that side of the Jordan. It does tend to separate them from the other tribes. There's a little coldness, and you'll see it later. They talk about this throughout the Bible, so that's why I say it always comes up as kind of a sore spot, all right? At the end of the book of Joshua, we're going to talk about this exact same thing again. Because of where they were much more prone to attack from the outside. They were the first tribes to get defeated and kind of pushed back later on because of not being in the center, not having the Jordan River as a boundary, something to protect you. As a matter of fact, it made it difficult for others to go and help them. So he says to them, he says, now behold, you have risen up in your father's place a brood of sinful men to add still more to the burning anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will once more abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all these people. Then they came near him, and they said, we will build here sheepfolds for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we ourselves will be armed, ready to go before the sons of Israel, until we have brought them to their place, while our little ones live in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the sons of Israel has possessed his inheritance. For we will not have an inheritance with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has fallen to us on this side of the Jordan toward the east. So Moses said to them, if you will do this, if you will arm yourselves before the Lord for the war, and all of you armed men cross over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven their enemies out from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then afterward you shall return and be free of obligation toward the Lord and toward Israel, and this land shall be yours for a possession before the Lord. But if you will not do so, Behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. Now go back to Joshua. They answered Joshua when Joshua had told them what they were to do, and that this was their land, but they were to array their men to go into battle in front of the entire tribe. He says, they answered Joshua saying, verse 16, all that you have commanded us, we will do. And wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. So they understand that they're willing to follow Joshua and do exactly what he says as long as they feel the Lord is with Joshua. As long as they feel that Joshua is leading them the way the Lord would have them to be led. They're willing to lay it all down the line for Joshua. When Joshua saw what Moses went through, he remembered exactly what Moses had said to the people, that Moses had promised them that if they would do what they said, then they could go back to their families and live on that side of it. And what Moses was so worried about is what everyone kind of gets worried about, is being discouraged. And Dion was here this week doing revival. And I don't know if we had a crowd this big, maybe this big, one night. I needed it. I really needed to hear what Dion had to say. It did me a world of good. Prayer, forgiveness. Forgiveness is hard. And what I find with people, those that are discouraging usually tend to have a hard time with forgiveness. Something didn't go the way they thought it should go, or something of that nature. Because they can't let go of it, they continue to retell of a story that's just discouraging. Have you ever met someone and you begin to talk with them, haven't seen them in a while, you begin to talk with them and they always bring up something that happened in the past. And they always bring up the same thing that happened in the past. But they're not mad, and they've forgiven everybody, but they continue to bring it up over and over and over again. And the reason is they've never forgiven them. Forgiveness is hard. It really is. You see, it's what makes what God did for you and I so special. Is that when we were lost, undone in our sin, unlovable, he forgave us. It's an amazing thing, folks. And what he says to you and I is this: if I forgive you, if someone who has never sinned forgives those that have sinned against them, shouldn't we as Christians be willing to forgive those who have sinned against us, right? When we do not forgive, we discourage constantly. Find it harder and harder and harder to deal with people, to talk to people, to be around people that you can't forgive. Now, I've had this same problem in my life. My mom and my stepfather started having an affair, and my mom left my dad and married my stepfather. I hated my stepfather. I did. I hated this man. And I had gotten saved probably 10, 12 years after they had gotten married. And God told me more than one time, Bill, you got to forgive him. And my hand to the Lord, there ain't no way. There ain't no way I could forgive that man for what he did. I could kill him probably, but I don't think I could forgive him. And he kept pushing it. I remember my little girls were sitting at a table. I was in a loft. I probably said this to you before, but I was in a loft in their cabin. And it had one bedroom where my mother and my stepfather were, and it had a loft. It had two beds up there. And the kids just kind of camped out on the floor. So the kids were up early. Katie and Jamie were sitting at a table down there. And they were getting ready to eat, I think, and they were praying. And Katie says, Jesus, don't come today because Grandpa's not saved. It dawned on me is that I always thought of this man one way, but my kids looked at him in a totally different way. That was Grandpa to them. And God told me then, he said, if you don't forgive him, you're never going to be able to witness to him. And I mean, tell you, I'm not lying when I said I really wasn't concerned. I really wasn't concerned with his soul salvation at that time. I just wasn't. And then it kind of hit me. You know? He hasn't done anything worse to you than what you did to your Lord. He didn't nail you to a cross. He didn't beat you, did he? He didn't pull the hair out of your face. How can you be so hard on him and not on yourself? I wish I could say it was done with right then, but it wasn't. It wasn't. It took a long time. But I can assure you, whenever I spoke about him, it was always discouraging. All I could think about were all the things about him I didn't like. And if I talked to anybody about my stepdad, that's how I talked about him, right? And it just wasn't healthy. When I was finally able to forgive this man, I can actually tell you I loved my stepfather. I did. I did get a chance to witness to him. He did make a profession of faith one day. Whether he was truly saved or not, I don't know, but he did make a profession of faith. I don't think it affected him at all when I forgave him. I really don't. But it sure affected me. Whew. It was like I had put a weight upon myself, and I wasn't willing to let go of the weight. And when I finally just set it down and gave it to the Lord and walked away from it, I can't tell you what a blessing that was. No longer was I discouraging in everything that I said about him. Now, everyone knew him for who he was. I mean, there was no denying that. But I didn't need to be the one piling on. I didn't. It wasn't right for a Christian to talk about somebody else in that way. It wasn't. And so I want to encourage you this morning. You've got to be willing to forgive in order to not be discouraging to what others are doing and to move on. Moses understood where he made his mistakes. He did. Moses understood that what the people wanted wasn't to shirk their duties, even though that's what he accused them of. And he was willing to forgive them of that and move on. Now, whether it turns out to be completely good or not, we'll talk about it as we go on in the book. But this morning, ask yourself, somebody in your life done you wrong, done you real wrong, that you haven't forgiven? Anybody. Because unless they've done something to you worse than what you did to Christ, you can't hold that grudge. You can't. It's wrong. So every head bowed, every eye closed. Ask yourself, Lord, is there anyone in my life, Lord, that I still hold ill feelings toward? Lord, bring this person's face to my memory right now. Lord, help me to forgive, to lay it at the altar, to ask forgiveness for feelings that I had no business having. Give me the courage, Lord, to go to this person and tell them that I'm sorry for the feelings that I've had. It doesn't matter whether they've truly hurt you or not. You've got to be willing to forgive. And I promise you, oh, Lord, may the windows of heaven just be open. May your blessings overflow on these people. Help them, Lord, to realize that when we act the way you acted, when we forgive the way you forgave us, Lord, all the blessings will just come. The only person that our anger and our hurt and our unforgiveness bothers is ourselves. So, Father, I ask you right now, break the chains of the bondage of unforgiveness in our lives right now. Set us truly free, Lord, that we might be used of you to reach a lost and dying world with the gospel of Christ. And Father, we're going to be sure and very, very careful to give you and only you all the honor, all the praise, and all the glory. And all God's people said,